Hey, what's up guys? So today what we're trying to do is get an idea of how a given player's positioning impacts their range, what maybe some of the current best practices are when it comes to prep step techniques and a variety of stakes. So essentially what you're looking at here is StatCast's outs above average leaderboard. I like using this for this kind of data because it gets a little bit more specific. We can see where a player is moving to his right, how he is moving in, to his left, moving back. So for the first stake we're going to look at is we're going to go left-handed hitter stakes. Now this is pretty standard across the board. We're going to have our shortstop positioned up the middle. So these will all be for shortstops. The first guy on this list that you see that really kind of jumps out is Volpe. He looks pretty dominant in this space. So we're going to dive in later to try to get an idea of what makes him so good here, what technique notes are relevant here, maybe some team positioning stuff that allow him to be more aggressive in a certain space, stuff like that. And then we'll start to divvy that up and compare and contrast that to other stakes and get a better idea of where we stand for that. All right, so now the next thing we want to address is the opposite end of the spectrum. What happens when we've got a pull side righty? So let's go, we're going to change this towards the third baseman shortstop hole for our shortstops. We're going to apply that just to get an idea of the guys who are finding more success in this space as well. And it's really cool. You got Bobby Witt Jr. leading the way, and again to his right, like he's got a lot of value there. Same with Lindor, right? And so we'll look a little bit about what they do. And so it's unique, right? These positionings, you start to see certain individuals being placed at, it seems like a little bit more extreme depth, but in reality, you're covering the same ground when you look at how the infield is organized and how the infield is constructed, the ground coverage from shortstop to second and vice versa. So it seems to me that the teams with more effective ground coverage, the teams that have guys who can do this more often, tend to be the teams that play along those edges of the lines. And for example, like we know that the positioning data from Lindor, specifically from 2023, from videos we've done in the past, he is in a very, very good position to field ground balls because the large majority of his data set are balls that were hit within 4 degrees of his visual, which means he doesn't have to range much. So it means that he's done a good job and his staff's done a really good job putting him in the right spot to make the plays. So using that data in conjunction with this and figuring out why is he so effective? Why is Bobby Witt Jr. so effective in this space? And a lot of it has to do with arm strength, but you look at a guy like Volpe, who's not, an upper echelon arm strength guy, having a ton of success in this space too. Let's look into this. I kind of want to dig into prep step details, a little bit about angles. Are they presetting angles? We know in the outfield, a lot of guys stagger step to cover different swaths of area. Are they doing this in the infield? What's the timing look like? Stuff like that. So we'll dive in there too. All right, so now what we're looking at is the Baseball Savant team positioning metrics, essentially. So now we've got these heat maps for where our players are positioned. We'll look at the Yankees first, just because Volpe pops up on both those lists as being an elite ground cover guy. When he's shifted off lefties, shifted off righties. So one of the things that's super interesting, so we're shaded. We're gonna go bat side left here to start. You won't see a ton of variety when it comes to shortstop positioning. You can kind of see with my cursor here. These guys are going to be shaded middle pretty hard because if you think about it, in the past when we could shift across the base, that positioning is going to be over top of the bag in most cases. So we don't really want to give that ground up if we can help it. So how do we cover that ground now that we're limited to staying on that half of the base as the pitch is struck? So you'll notice the third baseman's able to move around. Essentially that depth is cut in a line towards home. That's like a bunt guy, for example. So now if you got a Bryce Harper type, you play depth, more similar to like true righty stakes. And you'll see here when we turn the bat side to right-handed, where that third baseman was playing is essentially where the shortstop plays now. So that's pretty important for ground coverage purposes. Notice the first baseman leaks over. He's not as deep. He's coming in towards the baseline, covering ground that way. And then they take the second baseman and put him essentially in the reverse of where the shortstop was. So Again, this is going to be there's going to be some outliers here. Again, noticing the blue, that's where guys are moving in various scenarios. Maybe they've seen something from certain guys. But when it comes to Volpe and then a lot of other shortstops, you're not seeing that variety as much because we're trying, that's kind of like the anchor, right? We want to be able to build our ground coverage off our best defender and put him in the spot to best make plays. So a lot of that's dependent on that range and being able to find those anchor points to work off of. Now, let's look at Bobby Witt Jr. here. And so we'll notice here, we'll start with the right-handed hitter. Very similar to Volpe, right? There's not a whole lot of variety in his positioning. He's going to be playing pretty heavy pull-side stakes. Now, he plays a little bit more shallow than a lot of other defenders. Not a ton. He's playing at like 149 feet. Most of the guys are playing at 150, 151 if they're elite defenders. But he still covers ground at a 100 percentile. I mean, he can really get it done at his depth. So I don't think there's much to change there. Now, if we look to his left-handed hitter side, same deal, right? We're pinched middle. This allows us to swing the second baseman over, give some assists to the traditionally not as good fielding first baseman. There's the ground coverage. And from what we saw earlier, our ground coverage to our left, I mean, Volpe was really the only one who was having elite ground coverage to the space. So again, we'll dive into prep step timing and technique. Obviously, this still helps our guys get outs because in the past we would have positioned them in this space and maybe the second baseman deeper, but this is how we're moving our guys. Now there's less variety in our third baseman here, which kind of, it goes a little bit to the point of what are we valuing defensively? Are we going to make them bunt? If they bunt, yeah, go for it. Get it down. Prove to us that you can do it. Whereas you might play a little safer if you look at the Yankees. They don't want to give up that free base, right? They're gonna have a pitching staff that can challenge hitters. We don't want to give them a freebie. Let's make them earn it off us. So last one we'll look at is the Mets here because Lindor was covering an elite amount of ground to his right. So again, very similar with the ground coverage. Third baseman's even got less variety in this space compared to some of the other orgs that we've looked at. Now, when we look at our right-handed hitter, Lindor floats a little bit more than the average defender. Now, he's also one of the elite ground cover guys, especially for the age that he brings to the table. So a lot of this I'm going to anticipate is probably intuition and him feeling different pitches and pitch types. Now, every now and then he'll get some momentum with the prep step. But to be honest with you, the ground coverage, and again, we've got the first baseman coming in, maybe not as shallow as where the Yankees had him or as far over, but essentially that has to do with personnel too, right? You've got to be able to get back to the bag in time to have balance, to have rhythm. So that's dictated by that, but that's not going to be something where we sacrifice our second baseman to swing over for that ground coverage. We need to prioritize the center of the field here because with a righty bat, we see more balls hit in this space than they do over here. So that second baseman's got to be aggressive in this space. So. All right, guys, so the first thing we're going to look at is Volpe's stakes in his left-handed hitter positioning. So you can see from the video here, he's pinched pretty hard middle. Now, he doesn't do this all the time, but he does it often. And so there's, obviously, you'll see from the technique, he's going to have an extreme boost to his left. But it's the technique and the prep step that allows him to kind of gather himself and still be able to make plays to his right. So the worry for a lot of organizations and groups is that this technique's going to not allow you to cover ground to your right as effective as you need to. But if you notice where the third baseman's playing here, he's in a position where, and the coaching point should be, aggressiveness to your left as the third baseman. This is a much more difficult play for the shortstop. But you can see this ball isn't hit too far to Volpe's right at the beginning. We kind of get this precursor of where the ball is going to go. Obviously, he doesn't know that. They're anticipating the ball to be hit on this side of the base. But the trick is in the technique. So what we're seeing here from Volpe is, first of all, we want a tall setup. We don't want to be low. You'll see some of the other guys being low, but he's trying to maximize his output with his center of gravity. So he'll start tall, watch the fade, bounces left with air, lands post contact, so his right foot can anchor and save this play to his backhand side. Now, this is a phenomenal play. This is like a worst case scenario type play if you're Volpe in this spot. All of our data is pointing to the fact that that ball is going to be hit on the other side of the base. But the athlete that you have there solves a lot of problems. And again, here's the technique. The right foot can anchor down. We can tilt, create acceleration to save that play. Now, that third baseman didn't have a shot at that ball, but if we get something that's hit maybe a little bit slower, something that's more easily recognizable visually, then he'd be able to cut up. But that one's smoked up the middle, and Volpe's got to make a Gold Glover type play to get away with that. Now, again, sometimes if he's got a fastball or flamethrower guy who maybe the data isn't saying they're putting the ball on this side of the base, he's going to do his conventional north-south type prep step where it's a strictly neutral prep step, right? He's not leading to certain directions. And you'll see that a little bit with Lindor here. So this is Lindor in his right-handed hitter stakes. Now, he is a guy who's known to anticipate using his prep step a little bit, nowhere near to the extent of that technique. That seems to be fairly unique to that group. I haven't seen a whole lot of other major leaguers doing that. But what we see here from Lindor is strictly a very neutral prep step, up, down. And again, we've got a post-contact landing that allows him to get acceleration to his right. You don't see a whole lot of these guys who are landing at contact be able to cover ground the same way as guys who are landing just after. It has something to do with our weight shift and how we recognize flight. So again, looking at the footwork here, you've got a guy in Lindor who he is up and down neutral. We'll watch it again. Now he's not got the same height as Volpe, right? But he's still able to find that slot. Now this is a freak play too. This ball's top spun at like 103. But an incredible play with a guy who, again, older fella for the position, right? And he's able to get away with it because of his incredible reaction time, his near impeccable technique, and because he's positioned in a really good spot. Now, we look at kind of a contrast here with Bobby Witt Jr., right? And so what we see with Witt Jr. is a post-contact landing, but it's also like an at-contact start. So it feels a little late. But again, you get the reaction time with what Witt Jr. has and the ability to change direction like him. He can get away with it really well. And so he is fairly inconsistent with his technique. Sometimes he's going to be set up like this where he's in a really good spot to start narrow and then widen out as his center of gravity drops to change direction. That puts him in a really good spot. Other times we've seen him start really low, a little bit wide. Sometimes he's not ready at all. So I think a lot of it has to do with him finding the right rhythm and the right flow of the game. But what you can see here is this narrow base that he starts with turn into a wider foot placement as he goes to drive out. That's really important. So having that post-contact action obviously allows us to feel flight. Now, I would argue this might be a little bit too late. I think he could probably expand his range a bit. But what we're looking at here is the ability to finish plays too. You're not going to have guys who score really well working to their right without the ability to finish these plays. And you get a guy with an arm like this. I mean, a guy like Lindor too, who's able to let it rip. That's pretty impressive. Throwing across his body, the ability to get that ball there is pretty impressive. So just some things that help kind of adjust our stakes. And again, the ability to play it at a deeper depth allows us to cover more ground. The ability to finish plays allows us to play at more depth. Again, it maximizes ground coverage for the whole infield as you start to find where you can anchor guys. So pretty cool stuff, and we'll dig into more of this as we go along. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching, everybody. Feel free to subscribe. Make sure you check out our infield and base stealing communities on X, and check out the Baseball Blueprint podcast wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks.